Today, we're going to explore the idea of at minimum, we want you to do this. What does that at minimum really mean? How does it apply to the learning environment? This is where we're going today. So, quite often in our courses, in our workshops, in our instruction, we will use the term at minimum, we want you to do this. At minimum, we want you to use these tools. It's really important to understand what at minimum is. It isn't just a bare minimum. It's a point where you are going to be successful at doing something, but it's that point where you're building the foundation that we want you to build upon and we want you to go beyond. Before I get into my elaborate explanation, Talissa, I want you to jump in. What are your thoughts on this at minimum? At minimum, I know you use it as much as I do.
Yeah, I think we offer the at minimum perspective to help people sort of get started, if you will. But I think about experimenting with tools, having fun with tools, and playing around with what different things can do. And in doing that, you kind of start learning you can go beyond the at minimum, right? Is that where you're going with this?
Yeah, I think so. You mentioned tools. This is the important part. So, in our instructional design and the courses that we build, the workshops that we do, the professional learning environments that we create, we've really focused on identifying key tools that just work.
Hmm.
We use the iPhone simply because it just works.
Hmm.
I like the Android because you can do anything you want with it. You can configure it to do anything you want. It takes a lot of work. So we're always pointing you to tools that just work. Zoom, for example, is a tool that just works. Screencast-O-Matic is a tool we commonly use that just works. Now, Screencast-O-Matic is nowhere near as powerful as Camtasia or ScreenFlow, but guess what? It'll get you 85, 90%, maybe even 95% of that way there. That extra 5% is where you can go and go well beyond. And that's what we also want to talk about here today. So the at minimum focus with the tools, when we talk about that, we're going to point you to tools and resources that will really get you going and give you that foundation and give you the confidence you need to build upon. But they are at minimum tools, and we do want you to go well beyond. So um, do you want to jump in and add a
Yeah.
perspective?
A lot of these tools have amazing freebies too. So you can play around with a freebie on Captivate and Camtasia and some of these really cool, neat tools and see, ooh, is this something I like to do? Do I want to, oh, I know Zoom or I know Screencast-O-Matic pretty well. Do I want to take that next step and play around with Camtasia? But with that comes more functionality, comes more, control that you have. And you might go, oh, this might be a bit too much for me. But you won't know that until you test it out and try it, right? So you can always, default back to the at minimum tools. But going above that means you're going to have to adopt a bit of a growth mindset. You're going to have to play with the tool. It doesn't do what I want it to do. Well, let me try it again. Man, I'll tell you, let me give you an example. Last December, I was making an iMovie and I had to figure out what the Ken Burns effect was and what that meant and how to remove the Ken Burns effect iMovie. Once I figured it out, I was like, it's a click of a button. Not that bad. I'll remember that next time because of that name, Ken Burns. So each tool has its own function, its own thing that you just play around with it a little bit, see what it can do for you. And if it doesn't do what you need it to do for you, move on to something else, right?
Yeah, so the at minimum tools are really important, and we want you to think about, those tools that you can use, and we want you to explore and to experiment and to go beyond. And as uh, Dr. Thibodeau or Tillis has stated, you know, both of us are always experimenting and learning something new. I'm constantly experimenting with new tools, and I often get myself into deep, dark rabbit trails sometimes that can take hours. But at the same time, that learning process that I'm undertaking is helping me to become a better developer, a better instructor, a better learner. And I can share those experiences with people. So, going well beyond the at minimum, I think, is really important. And going beyond the at minimum tools is really important. And you had mentioned something that's really crucial here, and that's a growth mindset. And we believe that the growth mindset is a starting point where we want to get learners to, but it's the starting point. It's kind of that at minimum, because we want people to go beyond the growth mindset and go beyond failing forward and move into that learner's mindset where, you know, you're not just looking at opportunities as a way to grow, but you're also looking at those opportunities as a way to make a significant impact in the world. So even with the growth mindset, we want you to go beyond and move into that learner's mindset. So the at minimum with the growth mindset is a wonderful starting point, but I think we need to go beyond that. Now, do you have any other key ideas on the growth mindset and failing forward before we talk about grades and, you know, some of the issues that get in the way of the at minimum?
I do. I was thinking when you were talking about a growth mindset and really getting to that point where you're moving beyond it, you touched on something important. I think we want our learners to embody that state of flow where they're so immersed, involved, and excited about what they're doing, just like you and I are, right? Because we model what we do. We get into that state, we're like, oh, I got to move this. I mean, even just before this LMD today, I'm moving lights around. Oh, you know, the sun went down. I got to play around with my light system, have fun with different things, experiment, try, but get into that state of flow where it doesn't feel like it's, oh, how do I get through this obstacle? It's, ooh, how do I turn this challenge into an opportunity for myself? Ooh, well, if I just turn the blinds down a little bit, the sun comes in this way, the light box works great here. You know, these are hard tools, right? But I'm learning. And I'm not afraid to say, you know, I don't know everything. I'm Dr. Thibodeau, but I know a lot about a little, right? And I'm loving this idea of living in our own state of flow as we have these conversations because we are excited and passionate about these things. And I think that when you get to the point where you shift your focus to your own learning and how to learn and what you need to do to get to that state of flow where it just everything kind of happens naturally and you're inquisitive and you're investigative, you no longer have to try to get there. You just exist in that state. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does. This whole time I've been just trying to fight back a big cheesy grin because, you know, just think about it earlier on today. Remember the message I sent you when you said, "Are we shooting a video today?" And going, "Oh my God, I've been busy doing all this." I was in flow all morning. Yesterday and today I've been experimenting with sound and my setup in my studio, and it's just I call it a mental health day. You know, when you drop into that state of flow,
Mhm.
you lose track of time. You explore, you experiment. And actually this morning everything went wrong. I tried that didn't work. I tried this didn't work, but it didn't matter because I just kept on going through it. And then I finally came up with a solution, went online, checked a couple things, and then I thought, I'll combine this with this, and sure enough there was my solution. But I was in that state, and then I got the message from you, the notification saying we're shooting, and then I had to break my flow and to get into another flow. So I'm going from one flow to the next. I think it's really important. So the at minimum, I think, is a wonderful way for you to start getting into that flow, but we want you to go beyond that.
Mhm.
And we don't want you to allow things like a rubric, a checklist, or
Mhm.
grades to interfere with going beyond the at minimum.
Mhm.
Quite often, students will take a look at a rubric and they'll see, well, this is what I need to do for an A, this is what I need to do for a B, and this is what I need to do for a C. And well, they look at the A and they think that the minimum aspect of an A is an A plus or it's 100%. Well, quite often it isn't, because we always allow a little bit of room for growth and development. And if you simply design a rubric and you make the rubric so prescriptive and so specific, students aren't going to learn a thing. The research is so clear on this. The research with rubrics on creative writing and academic writing, the research on a variety of other things dealing with rubrics, the more specific a rubric is, the more limiting it is, and the less a student or the learner thinks about learning. The
Mhm.
rubric gets in the way of learning. So, when you're designing your courses, when you're designing your learning environments, when you're designing your workshops, you have to be careful that you don't use rubrics or rating guides or checklists in such a prescriptive way that it'll interfere with the at minimum.
Mhm.
You want to introduce the notion of the at minimum as a starting point to build upon and to go well beyond. So at minimum, you can do this, and that's really, really good. But guess what? You want you don't just want good, you want great. You want to go
Mhm.
from good to great. I know I'm borrowing um, Jim Collins' idea, but that at minimum is just a starting point to move you towards that grade. And I think it's really important that you understand that. So don't let rubrics, don't let grades, don't let the thought of an A, I got to get that A, get in the way. Because if you focus on building something significant, if you focus on getting involved in that environment and you get into the flow, guess what? You're
Yeah.
going to get that A. You're going to do fine. You're
Right.
going to go well beyond that
Hmm.
because you're building something significant. You're creating something significant, and it's important to you. So
Yep.
it's really important we don't allow this. Did I miss anything there? Probably did.
You actually touched on what I was going to say. You really have to take into account the bigger picture of what you're doing, because that to me is so much more than at minimum. If you focus and isolate an assignment just by itself, this is what I'm doing. I'm working on making outcomes, but I'm not looking at my bigger picture. Okay. So, like my phone here, if I just look at that little apple right there and that's all that I see, that's all I'm going to look, that I'm homed in on that. That's all I'm going to see. Step back, you see the phone, right? You turn it over. Oh, and you've got all these options on it. There's a much bigger picture. And when you invest in that bigger picture and see beyond that at minimum perspective, right? When you look at that much larger 50,000, 100,000 foot view, then it's like your grade is just kind of a byproduct of that experience, right? You're not even, you kind of forget about your grade, right? The best grades disappear, okay? They're going to be there anyways, right? But they're going to come with your investment in what you're doing. And I tell people in my classes all the time, and they kind of, oh, okay, and I'm going to tell you, I throw that out there, and it's amazing what comes back. Learners, they're starting to collaborate. It's no longer, you mean I get a little bit of a freedom to choose what I want to do? You mean I don't have to follow this? Yeah, and those questions come. Yeah, yeah, make this yours. Let me give you a little bit of choice, ownership, and voice there. And if you're doing it within the context of an authentic learning opportunity, you're going to make connections and you're going to apply the things you've learned in a way that you may have never seen them before if you step beyond the at minimum.
Oh, I think you've touched on a few more things that I want to jump on as well. And the notion of investment in yourself, I think that's so important. I remember that one of the first times you said that a few years ago, I was thinking, oh, that's a great idea. I got to use that too. And I have been using the same notion. You know, we have to invest in ourselves because if we are going to be creating learning environments for our learners, well, guess what? We need to model the type of learning we expect
Hmm.
them to be doing.
Yeah.
So you have to invest in yourself. And so the time you spent fighting with iMovie, the time that I've spent recently fighting with DaVinci Resolve, this is an investment in ourselves because as we gain knowledge and experience, we can share that with others, and we can make a bigger impact in people's lives. And so that investment is really important. And we've often said that we're not going to ask people to do what we won't do ourselves. So we're continually investing in ourselves. We're continually developing our capabilities and our capacities. And you're right, the best type of a learning environment and that at minimum stuff goes away, just like the technology, right? At minimum. Now, we've been talking about individually getting learners to work on that at minimum. The exciting part when you have a collaborative environment, when you have groups of people going well beyond the at minimum, they push the boundaries and they start
No.
pushing the limits. And
Hmm.
then one person goes, oh wow, that's a good idea, I never thought of that, I'm going to try that. And then the person
Hmm.
goes, oh, that's a great idea, I'm going to try that. And then somebody goes, that's interesting, what if I did it this way? And before you know it, these different
Hmm.
pathways morph into something amazing, and students can go well beyond the at minimum and really take ownership of that learning experience and find
Hmm.
their voice and create the most amazing things. And that I think is what we really are talking about here. We want to help you by providing the minimum starting point, that
Hmm.
minimum foundation. If you use the tools, if you do what we recommend, you know what, this is going to be a wonderful foundation to build on. Trust us, we've got some experience here. We'll help you get that foundation. But guess what? We want you to go well beyond that minimum. We want you to go from really good to great and to explore and to take ownership. Because eh, at minimum's okay, but I think you want a little bit more.
Yeah.
Any closing thoughts?
I was thinking about if I were a student, what would this beyond at minimum look like? Well, there's two things I want to say. The first thing is when you start challenging yourself that way, you kind of live in that state. It's something you no longer become afraid of. You challenge yourself, you have successes with it. Yeah, you fall down a little bit, you fail, but you fail forward. You don't just fail, you fail forward, right? So you start living in that, okay, I want to learn more about this, I want to do that. how do I do this? What do I need to set up? What do I need to research? Well, Google's my best friend, right? I can Google that, Pinterest and Pinterest that, right? Do my kitchen cabinets, Pinterest that. So lots of exciting stuff there. But you kind of live in that state, and every single opportunity you see, you want to make it golden, right? So you want to go from good to better, like you were saying. The other piece of that is, what does this look like to our learners? When I see a good to great innovation plan that pops through from a student perspective, they have thought about all of the connective threads, all of the people involved. They have told me a story. It's not just an isolated thing. There's an assignment on a page with an Adobe Spark, and I just flip through it. No, they've told the story. They've linked out to different things, different resources. They have connected all of their body of work together, and it's cohesive enough that I can look at that one page and be able to follow their thinking. And when that happens, I know they've gone from good to great. That tells me they're invested in their learning. And guess what? I want to invest that much more in their learning when they're invested in it too, right? So there's more benefits than just on the student level at minimum, right? Professors respond to people who are going above and beyond. Wow, look at this. And we can help you. Even if someone's struggling and they're struggling with the minimum, ask us for help. We're happy to help. We'll step in there and say, hey, you know what? This is your project, your plan, your idea. We're going to help coach you and facilitate you to get to that good point so you can get to great. And that's where we're at. That's our thinking.
Well, I think you've covered all the key ideas. I'm just going to wrap up with a couple quick thoughts. We want you to go beyond that minimum, but we're going to help you with that foundation at that minimum. And if you invest in yourself, we'll invest in what you're doing too, and we'll help you move beyond that at minimum and help you go from good to great.